with the TEDx team in Wageningen.
Yeah, exactly right. It's also fantastic to talk with you, with all your experience and the jobs you've had in the past. Right, shall we start? So everyone, welcome to this very special edition of the TEDx Wageningen University podcast, a live podcast. In the next 30 minutes or so, we'll reflect over the last 6 months, what it means for us and the climate and which direction we might be taking from this point on. For everyone who are watching, this is a live discussion, including all of you. So if any of you have any questions, please comment them during the discussion in the comment section on YouTube or on LinkedIn, and we'll try and answer as many as possible at the end of the discussion. So first of all, thank you for joining. I'm really excited and privileged to talk with you today.
Hey Finn, how are you doing, man? Thanks for making this happen.
Fantastic. Before we go into the main section of the live podcast, I'm going to just ask some 10 really quick questions on that's on many people's minds with the how and the what in terms of the climate. So it'd be great to have some of your insights on this. But please keep your questions to less than 30 seconds. So first question, what can we do personally with the climate action?
I think only 3 things: act, act, act.
Fantastic. And then how can we learn the skills necessary to do our parts?
Yeah, that's a question I've got asked very often also recently on LinkedIn, which is very interesting for me. I think there are fantastic courses out there. You can check out on Circular Economy, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. There are fantastic courses on Udemy that really teach you about systems change. But I think the most important for me has always been, personally, to mix your theoretical exposure to learning, go somewhere and really implement it in any day with a team, with an organization that you really love, and get your hands dirty.
Yeah. And how can we make the climate transition appealing? How can we make it sexy?
Yeah, it's something that struck me when we talked about this, when we prepared for the podcast, when the environmental minister of Japan said, we have to make this transition sexy. And the last weeks I truly was thinking about this. It's true. We can't always go around with the finger high up and say, hey, we have to do this. I think we need to make it interesting for people. And hopefully we can get today really examples from our audience. How can we make it sexy? I think we need to design products that are really appealing, but that are good for the environment and society. We need to design organizations and businesses in such a way, and therefore we need the leaders to take that steps in the right direction, because it's a difficult path to do. It's a difficult one to try to change, go against the system. And please, guys and ladies out there, submit ideas for us how we can make it sexy. It has to be something that we all want to do. We all want to be part of this. And the jobs of the future, I hope, are not with Google, but you actually want to go to the future organizations that are designing the green economy that we all want to have.
Yeah. And
nothing against Google, by the way, but I think Google is a very interesting employer, and I think there must be also companies that are doing for the triple bottom line even more.
Yeah. And what should we really focus on right now in terms of action as well?
I think one important one is, because it sets the tone for the future, is please vote right. Please vote correctly with your conscience and where the right ideas for the future are coming from. And I think everybody has to decide this for him or herself. And 2, don't wait for change come to you. Really bring the change to wherever you are. That could mean that you want to change your own career, but it could also mean that today you're making the steps that your organization and that you help your business to change. And truly bring the topic back in any discussions you have. Really walk the talk. Because as we did in the last days, we explored many ways of collaborating to each other. You're organizing the big conference with Wageningen University on climate. Go there, expose yourself, vote correctly, and try to really bring change in your daily work.
Yeah. And when we look at the future, do you think we can achieve it from what you see now? Can we achieve it? Can we stay below that 1.5 degree threshold?
I think it's always very interesting, because in the last years, the time frame seems to have gotten shorter. The time we still have to make this difference. And now the 10 years are out there. 2030 is the year by which we have to make it possible, because otherwise climate chaos hits. And I think it's like building a house. When you hear of people having a project in the built environment, the projects are always getting more expensive in terms of cost. So I think the climate is a very dynamic system, and we don't have not figured out all the side consequences that can speed up the process of change. So I would assume that the time frame we actually have will get really shorter. And friends of mine that are discussing how, for example, to change the course in the shipping industry. When you think where we want to be in 2030, that we want to go to zero emission vessels, that what it means in terms of when these vessels have to be built, to the time when we have to start to design them and build the collaboration with the companies that we need. We have to start this year. It's 2020 or 2021 where this has to happen. That's why I just encourage everybody, please get yourself educated and involved in whatever industry you're out there. There are amazing commitments coming up. Just some days ago from the aviation industry, when the One World Alliance of 13 different airline companies said, we want to go net zero. And that's really a tough one. So we really have to put the best brains in the world and the most enthusiasm and the brightest people out there to align themselves with the science, because we have it, with the technology we have. But I think it's just the manpower and the action and the energy that now has to follow together with the finance. And I think that's truly possible.
Yeah. And when we're really trying to push this this climate action, what is the best way to communicate this with others?
My first job as a journalist, so I often think about when I talk, like now, I hear myself talking in my head and think, does it land with people? Do you understand what I'm saying? Because we are all in these bubbles, right? I was in a circular economy bubble. Now we are part of a climate bubble. As I'm seeing myself as a student every day, trying to pick up and learn and challenge myself on the way forward, I try and encourage people to keep the language simple and interesting, right? Yeah. So to talk too scientific might be impressive, but I'm trying to remind myself, let's speak from the heart to the heart. I can reach your brain, that's fantastic, but change comes from when you have an internal focus that you don't let go anymore. Yesterday, a fellow countryman just won the US Open, another Austrian. And what I learned following the careers of sportsmen, it's very interesting. Yeah, they are so focused that finally some of them make it. And I think we have to be really so razor sharp focused on where we want to go, the future we want to together achieve, and then communicate lightheartedly in an appealing way that people want to be part of this future. I think that has to be the way forward, rather than saying you must and you have to. I think these times are also over, and we have to acknowledge that. And I think we have to teach our politicians and the business people, the CEOs of this world, who do often fantastic work, to adopt this lighter language and make it appealing for people.
Yeah. It's definitely much more of an emotive argument than a rational sometimes.
It's a tough one, though. It's really difficult. It's like a whole science of communication.
Yeah, exactly. And the last few, very, very quick, what has been the biggest success of last year? What has been the biggest failure? And just provide one quick word to describe the last year.
It's a tough one. When I read the news, I think the one that I just mentioned, that you see the airline companies that are so much part of the issue obviously we're facing, that's such an industry that will face so many challenges on the way forward towards net zero emissions, that they actually commit now, and that there is like every day a new commitment about an industry or company stepping up, a CEO saying, I'm part of this, I'm on. That's really, I think, the biggest success of 2020. And as we discussed a bit before, I think the pandemic, the COVID crisis really gave us a real big push in the right direction. I think that was really amazing. And the sad thing is with the wildfires that I think we see everywhere now still, it's the biggest failure that we have not managed yet to stop these disasters that I think partly are man-made, and that we are really destroying a big part of our future and the future of our next generations. And that makes me truly sad. And every day it's a failure when I don't manage at least to convince 5 other people to be part of the transition, because that's what I'm trying to do and set myself as an own target. to go out there and really make a change by convincing people.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so
just convince them, give them an opportunity to change, and forgive me an opportunity to also learn myself. That's what I wanted to say, actually.
Yeah, fantastic. To everyone watching, just to remind you, you can just post a question in the comment box, and then if you'd like to ask a question to Harold, and we'll try best to answer most of them at the end. Moving on to the main parts, I know we've already done some reflection on the COVID pandemic already, but yeah, a lot has happened in the last 6 months. A lot has changed, a lot hasn't. So my question to you really, has the coronavirus really crisis really grounded us? Has it really cherished the things that we have, the worlds that we live in, or rather has it been a really big distraction from the climate crisis?
Yeah, very cool. I mean, the one thing we are doing here now, I just love it that we can collaborate so easily online now. This has become just part of our daily lives, and I think we have accepted maybe the perceived inconveniences that we saw in the past and said that's the way to collaborate. I mean, that's there's a whole shift coming with companies like from the medical sector. I spoke recently with Sandoz, with Booking, many other companies that just say the old world now stops. We don't need to force everybody to come to an office. We provide the opportunity to do so, but we rather give support and help people to manage their own home office, home studio. And hopefully in the future, when we can travel more again and when the danger of COVID is also limited, there will be also part of the day and part of the week that we spend together. I'm currently working in a global team around climate action and the climate change negotiation. And we are like a team of 50 experts globally. They would never work together in one team if we wouldn't work together now online. I think that's just a tremendous way that this big shift has happened. And it gives me hope that, as I think the president of Microsoft said, the broadband is the gold and the energy of the future. If we are really connected in that way and we put the best people to the biggest problems, it's going to create a lot of opportunity to solve these issues. I say this very humbly, as I think still half of the population on this planet doesn't have access to internet. So I always want to remind ourselves here, I don't want to have a bubbled conversation from the West in Europe here. I'm trying to think of my friends in India and China and in Vietnam, wherever they are sitting, or in South America. Does it also resonate with them? I think that's really the big issue. So one is that I took away from the COVID crisis is this connectivity issue and online. And on connection, I wanted to say the second thing is I managed myself again to be much more connected locally where I live now and take the time to link with your neighbors and to see how they are. And I think this has created this new opportunity to look into each other's eyes again and say, okay, I stop hasting and running around and make this connection the moment, which I think is this important moment to say, okay, where are we now? Status quo, and where do we want to go together? This very human interaction has also, from my point of view, gotten revived in these times. How important it is for us to be interconnected, and how much I think the solution for any future problems must lie locally and in the connection with the communities. And obviously, the third point is the vulnerability of our international system, of the value chains, of the governance system internationally, of the financial system, has, I think, made us all very humble. I was waiting for my computer for 2 months during that time because the old one was damaged because of a water damage. And I think it normally would take 2 weeks or so. We just have to question, I think, if these long value chains around the globe make sense all the time, because obviously they don't, and they are not necessarily built for a green and sustainable economy. So this COVID crisis was really a tremendous halt, a point to stop. And what I recently read from a US professor, which I wanted to leave with people in their mind, is he was talking about it gave us an opportunity to see the tyranny of the status quo. So the tyranny is something we don't want, and how much we have really stuck in the status quo, and that this big break of COVID gives us an opportunity to say, oh, maybe this is not what we want. We really have now to gather the strength to get out of this together. So I hope for all of us that this was the biggest learning, that the tyranny of the status quo is not something we have to accept, and that with the communities and the support we can give each other, we can create the strength to move out of this into a newer system that is more just and more sustainable.
Yeah. Time for reflection. Yeah, going off your points a bit there with the bigger picture. Two really big lessons I guess we have really learned from the Corona crisis is, firstly, like you said, the underlying vulnerabilities of our socioeconomic systems, how it's a globalized, financialized, trade-based economy based on efficiency rather than being resilient, which can really collapse in times of external stress. And then the second lesson really is how much, showing how much we need to change to address emissions. So imagining all of the disruption that's caused, the massive reduction in movement and industrial output has only resulted in about a 4 to 8% carbon emission reduction, with what the world has experimented with so far during this crisis. And so going to the work you've been doing the last few years at circular economy. Circular economy is one of the solutions of decoupling our dependency on carbon and making shorter supply chains, more resilient supply chains. Have you seen the crisis really put emphasis on the circular economy as an alternative, more resilient and more sustainable system?
I think it's one important ingredient. We are cooking a nice, fresh, green new meal, and we need the circular economy as part of that, I believe, or at least some of the thoughts and of the tools that the circular economy can bring. Because why would we? I mean, for you guys that have not been so familiar with circularity, it's a system where we don't create something to throw it away, but how we can keep things in circles in the biggest value of a product, how we can keep things longer in existence, how we can use less materials for the input, and how we can design things that really survive. And I find this a fascinating concept because it doesn't only talk about materials, it talks about us as human beings. Nobody wants to create a mess in their back garden, really. We want to create a regenerative, beautiful, blossoming thing where we have many people join and people invite and people give and we get something in exchange. And that fascinates me about circularity as a principle. I think if your question is if this has to be part of the future and if we have seen any encouraging signs, if it's happening right now, I think for the status quo, I think we see a lot of signs that the debate is shifting into the right direction. The airline companies are coming out. Mr. Al Gore and the investment sector says the green economy is the biggest investment opportunity of our times, of humankind, which is an amazing way to think about it. If you say, what do I want to invest in as a person? And you say in the future, and there are businesses of the future, there are organizations that really make that happen. I really get very excited when I think about this. So you have these front runners that are committing. You have cities saying like London and New York, the big financial centers, we're not going to invest the pension funds of our people anymore in fossil fuel. I think that's an encouraging sign. You have, I think Kenya said we stop our fossil fuel subsidies. So these signs are happening. And in my work with the Global Climate Action Champion, it's also interesting that it seems to happen at an increasing speed. I think many of us hoped that in the last months things would have happened faster. But there the response of governments to the health crisis, I think, was prioritized. And the economic development maybe put second. And it has to happen now this year. That's what you're right. It has to. The time frame is we don't have so much time anymore. And if we build on this a lot of goodwill, and I think you have a couple of organizations globally that also try to establish a narrative on the global level, really, and come out very bravely saying we need to do this now, there's not going to be another year or 2 years that we can delay this, then I hope that the national governments are picking this up much more in their actions and investments. Because I just try to look at anecdotal evidence. I think only a very small percentage of investments that have been promised are actually being dedicated to green recovery, because we start to only understand the difficulties of how to set up a new green recovery. And I hope that because money is now available to build the future, that the governments, the cities, and the businesses make the plans now, that in a half-year time, the money can be aligned to make that also a reality.
Yeah, yeah. And going off what you're saying about the whole national responses with the EU's response, or the European Commission, they've already devised a 750 billion COVID recovery package, of which they said 30% must comply with the principle of do not harm with the EU green goals. Yeah. But at the same time, they've massively reduced several EU climate funds that are used to help EU countries to reduce their carbon emissions. And they've also actually reduced scientific funding. And on top of that, of all the 2 trillion coronavirus rescue funds that have been spent by each of the EU countries, they've all had pretty much no green guarantees. And so this is actually also a question to everyone who's watching, just to get your insights if you want to answer this question as well in the comments. How effective do you think the EU and national responses have been, not just rebuilding a post-COVID society, but a green post-COVID society?
Limited so far. I think let's be very honest. Let's take out a couple of examples. Some countries are now coming with circular economy plans, for example, but a prominence of building back better strategies I have not seen. And when you're talking about that the EU at the same time has reduced important other sources of funding, then I can only imagine, and I have not looked into details of this, that part of this rescue package and build back better investments are repackaging of old initiatives, which we always see. So I wouldn't be surprised if this happens here again. And I call out to all of us to keep the policymakers accountable and say they shouldn't fool us by saying so much money is going now into the future, and really start to prove that to us what is being invested in. Because I think it's a shame in this day and age that that we still do that. I think that's unacceptable. That's the only thing I can say. Yesterday, I read that there are also some CEOs, 150 CEOs, I think, came out to support and ask the EU even to more braver targets, to even go beyond the 55% reduction in emissions targets for 2030, because they recognize the next 10 years are crucial for that. So a short answer to your question, I think not enough is happening. No, for sure not. I think we should call this out. That's our responsibility as citizens, and make it as specific as possible also what we are demanding. So really an investment in building back better, make plans publicly with public consultations ideally, where we look into something that looks like a green economy, but a green economy will not be successful if it doesn't look at equity and in terms of a more equitable society, because we need to look at the jobs for the future. And I think we need to take now the most people along and not repeat the mistake of the past, where most of the people have not been included in the prosperity that was created. I think it was much just too unfairly distributed, which has gotten us so far. Now we need to really give people the voice back. I think that's an important one, and really have an economy that is regenerative and redistributive. And I think redistribution is an important way. How do we design a future in which we also have technology that will destroy many jobs, which is maybe a good thing, but at the same time, how we can redefine ourselves as human race, on how does our future societies look like? I think that's a really interesting question. And I'm always very frustrated when discussions are killed by politicians or the opposition, when one says, okay, there's the universal basic income idea, and the other one comes from a very dogmatic point of view and says, that's not the answer. I think now all cards have to be in the table. We are in an emergency situation of the planet. The new generation is going on the street and says, what the fuck are you doing? You can't continue like this. So to continue to ignore that and play hide and seek would not be the right answer to my question, to this question. But I think we have to challenge all ourselves what we can do, because I don't have the right answers. I can just tell you where I think it should go. A system of the future has to be green. That's clear. We want to continue to live on this planet. It needs to be more just than it has been in the past. And it needs to give people an incentive to also be part of an economy. I think that would be interesting for me. And it has to be co-created. I think that's very much I believe in. It's not the politicians that create for us. It has to be, new system have to be invented and sought, where the inclusion of the electorate is much stronger, where we can co-create with the policymakers, and technology can make it all happen. So I'm very positive about that. We live in amazing times. The next decade will be so interesting for all of us, in which we all want to make this transition sexy, because we need to be part of it. And I would like that everybody wants to be part of it.
Yeah. And when we move slightly away from the policy side to the corporate or the business sector side, The Guardian, I think a year or two ago, they published a whole series of articles on how the top just 100 companies were responsible for the source of over 2/3 of the world's greenhouse gas emissions since 1988. And then the top 20 were in fact responsible for a third. And so it really showed the power and importance of the biggest companies in the world, essentially, and how important it is for them to start aligning their business models to one that fits for a finite planet and fits with climate science, I guess. So to name a few examples, for example, Unilever, whose products are used by more than 2 billion people each day, have pledged to invest 1 billion in eliminating all of fossil fuels from their cleaning products in the next 10 years. Uber are aiming to electrify their entire fleet in Canada, the US, and Europe in the next 10 years, and worldwide in 20 years. Apple have pledged to make every product carbon neutral in the next 10 years. Amazon, next 20 years. IKEA, 10 years, the list goes on. Even BP, one of the biggest oil companies in the world, have vowed to cut their oil and gas production by 40% in the next 10 years, which is, especially significant considering they are the 11th largest emitter in history. Some of these pledges have been backed up by exactly how they're going to do it. Some of these haven't. And so how promising do you think these commitments are by the business sector?
Very interesting question. For me, a commitment is really only the starting point. Let's be very, very honest. Like it's like if you have the baseline for a strategy to change, but without the baseline, we wouldn't know where we are going. So that's what I like it. Yeah? And the commitments, let's be very honest, are happening now, as I said before, at an increased speed. So I think we should always command and support the people who make that commitments. As an investor said to me the other day, if we don't support those that stick their head out now, then this whole transition might crash again, because we need to empower those that really want to go this extra mile and change. So as a realistic activist, I think, as I am, I would have a healthy portion of skepticism, as we all know. That's always good. And it's fantastic that Unilever and all the ones that you mentioned, until BP and the airlines of this world, that they say they want to. And I think there should be accountability measures from the consumer put in place. And let's be also very honest, the NGO space has in the last years also lost trust of people, the scandals that came out of that. But it's very important to set up this transparency mechanism of helping with an outsider's point of view as a civil society organization to hold these businesses accountable. I think one is the market, because we live in a capitalist system, and I think the capitalism can also be transformed into one that is accountable and sustainable if the rules change. It's not about the name, it's about the rules that are governing it. And if in this system of the capitalism of the future, we manage to put a lot of transparency measures, accountability measures, and checking mechanisms towards the companies that make the commitments now, that must be the way to go. And I think the governments, as we see now, for example, in Germany, with some governments saying we want to play a stronger role again, an intelligent role, one that is not controlling citizens, but is securing the future, the infrastructure of the future, and creating transparency around markets, for example, because we don't leave everything to a market. That seems to me an intelligent way. Something I read the other day was, and at the same time, we need to manage and find a framework and rules that ensures that the costs for a company, the cost of the capital, reflects also the governance of how a company is run and its impact on a social and environmental level. In short, it needs to be easy with good products to have a cheaper price, and it should be for products that shouldn't exist anymore to have a higher price. Yes, we often think about taxation, but there are also other ways and levers to achieve that. It's a question we have to ask ourselves as society. Do we want to go there? Do we want to finally leave the cheaper is better way behind, also as consumers, and give a rise to a new level and a new breed of companies that is enabled by the right framework and the right governance structure and by the right laws to produce things that are sold and that we accept as consumers because they are part of this future solutions. So I am very encouraged by the companies to step up. I think we should be not naive to just let that go, but create accountability mechanisms, make sure that the digital means are also used through storytelling, through the financial accountability, through credible companies, and maybe some of them should be also in the public interest, that we create a fair level playing field for the future. And that's a total different way what we have done in the past when non-sharing was an advantage and being just by yourself. We have to think about 1 + 1 is 5. I think that's my conviction, and I believe that's possible. So let's support everybody who takes the right step, but make sure they are actually taking the right steps.
Yeah. And in terms of the companies who haven't taken these steps yet, just a really quick bonus question on that part. What do you think is the main stumbling block why they don't take that action? Is it merely the capital to invest to make the change, or is it actually more than that?
Yeah, I recently engaged with very interesting industries from the private equity, from a private equity field to music and event producers. And everywhere you deal with humans, like you, me, are wonderful people listening and joining today and looking at the stream. And I believe in the good of people. Yeah. In the end of the day, if you ask me, are people good or bad? I think I'm totally on the side that say totally good. There might be we might be covered with all kinds of assumptions and things we have allowed ourselves to say, but in reality, we want to feel community. We want to give love and accept love and have a good life together. And that's difficult enough, I think, with our own brains in the way most of the time. And I think that's why we truly have to help each other and stand up for each other and say we can make this happen together, and not finger point. I think that's really a hard question. And often, yes, it's the absence of money, it's the absence of strategy, it's the absence of maybe coming. That's where we are. That's the starting line. That's why I say let's go out there every day, speak to the ones that haven't been spoken to. Let's see if it can make it very interesting to make them part of this human race towards a sustainable planet, because that's what we are here to do, and hopefully have fun with it. Create business opportunities along this, to create job opportunities, and vote the right people into offices that want the same as us, the people. So I'm very, very hopeful in that we can make that happen. And the more we go into the talks with industries that have not stood up yet and said, we are part of this, the more we just have to make them part of the conversation and not finger point. I truly think it's up to us to take the first step towards them.
Yeah. And moving a bit towards the future, we we have two really possible scenarios that are in front of us.
Yeah.
The first one being a really, positive accelerators climate action world, where we see political attention staying on course with the climate agenda. Green recovery with emission reducing behaviors, increased teleworking and working from home. And a scenario where we really see regulators taking advantage of, the lower oil price to increase carbon taxes and to reduce fossil fuel subsidies. Or we have the other side, or the other very conceivable future, where we see this attention moving away from the climate agenda, where we actually see these lower oil prices making zero carbon technologies much less competitive. And when we see perhaps relaxations of governmental standards to not inhibit growth almost. And so what do you see us leading on to from at least what you've seen so far? Because we've seen with the EU that they have made it so that they're not, they're doing the do no harm to the EU goals, but at the same time they're taking other steps so that they're not, they're taking away budgets from other dedicated EU climate funds. We're seeing a lot of mixed messages, I have to say, but from what you see from this point onwards, if we look forwards, which direction do you think we're heading towards?
So I hope this becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. I hope it's towards action, my friend. It's towards action, where I hope we're gonna we are all leaning in towards. When you said all of this, it is isn't it absurd that as humankind we do this, we say this and do that, and then sometimes we do something good, and then we do something worse.
Yeah.
I like the when I was talking about the tyranny of the status quo. So we don't want to continue with the status quo, and it often upsets me when we have to argue why we need a different system, because I think the system that we have created so far is not really one that is fit for the future. But when I get up in the morning, I think, how can we do fundamentally better rather than just a little bit less bad?
Yeah.
And if we, at least that's why I try to guide my actions in when I divide my time in the day, what I do with friends, with the community, with the work I'm in. And I'm sure I'm failing many times in a day and not doing the right thing. But I hope more and more that I do a majority of actions that I'm going in the right direction. So I guess it will always be this balance as a policymaker, as a business person, as a human being in society, that we balance it and that we're not too harsh on each other, but that we recognize there's not so much time left and we need to speed up now. And that makes me hopeful. If we have more vulnerable dialogues, like I said to you, I really don't have all the answers. I try to stay on top. I try to be a student of our times, of an amazing time of change. But I will not. What one thing I'm fairly good at, and what I want to use as a talent, is I will not get bullshit passed by anymore. I think just to tell each other whatever we have in our mind and try to get away with it. These times need to be over, because too often one part of the brain doesn't seem to be linked with the other. We see the wildfires and the I don't know, the turtles with all the plastic in their stomach and what all the disaster that we know. Yeah. And at the same hand, we know we can do something every single day. And that excites me so much. And this I try to communicate with people. You can do something about this. You're part of this chain. We know that when I think the butterfly wings in Holland, if the bike falls down in China or something, the chaos theory. We are part of one interdependent system. That's what I learned in circular economy, where every action you take has an effect. Yeah. And I think that's also my human experience, having also learned the different cultures of this world. Look at Buddhism, look at the big religions of this world. That's what they are saying. We're interdependent. And if we take this positively forward, if we try to make our balance every single day, but have our focus right, to know where we are going, I think that's often absent to people. People haven't decided where they want to go. You want to be part of the change or not? That's a very clear decision. And then you will go in the right direction. It's the same for CEO. When I speak to one on Wednesday again, I will ask him the same question. You want to be part of it or not? If yes, it's very clear what you want to do, what you have to do. And I think that's what we have to hold each other accountable and help each other. And hopefully it's a conversation that we continue on all kinds of social media channels that you can reach me on Instagram, Harry Circular, or on LinkedIn, because I love to get input from others, amplify that, and also help to help the TEDx community. Finn, I really enjoyed our conversation, and I hope I had some more positive answers than the ones I didn't answer properly, but I tried my best.
Yeah. And yeah, I guess just for the last part, just some very, very quick questions really is, there's always that debate on, should we focus on policy, big business, or individual action? A really quick answer. What do you think about that whole debate?
Oh yeah, it's a boring answer. We need all, right?
Yeah. Okay.
We need to set the right policies now, and I think recently what the UK in the UK there's again a move towards a climate emergency bill that really tries to reinforce the notion of we have to change now. I love the whole emergence of the climate litigation that people and countries are accused in front of courts, like here in Holland, of the citizens that say you don't doing enough for us, it's unhealthy for us.
Yeah.
Business leaders have to change now, and we as consumers have to do it now. Honestly, let's really start when we are going out there and buy the right thing from the right people in the right context. Let's try to be more local and help each other. It really only can come from if the push comes at the same time from all different angles. I'm fully convinced of this. And as you and me, we have different roles. We are consumers, but we're also students, and we are business people, and we also have a vote that is important for our governments. So we have an influence on all of those.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, I think now is a good time to move on to some of the questions that have been asked by the.
Thanks everybody for being there still.
the audience. Yeah, we have quite. So you mentioned earlier about how it's not about pointing fingers. It's more about doing it yourself. What are your thoughts on things like flight shaming? Is it something that is a proactive approach, or merely something that just polarizes the issue a lot more?
Yeah, so something it is for me personally very relevant, because I'm an expert since 20 years, and then you use flights a lot.
Yeah.
So I never have a problem with pointing out blacks and whites of a situation. I think that's always good to say, okay, that's one side, that's the other side, but then let's really come with options. It makes me very happy now that the flight industry, the aviation industry, says they want to work on net zero by designing different aircrafts, by working on biofuel. But the big part of the industry is still the offsetting, right? And there's a lot of talk about offsetting the goods and the bads, and it's a whole science in itself. And it's part of the solution as we know it now. I think that's what we have to admit as well. So I love a lively debate. I think shaming is never the right thing, because I would always try to say, what are you doing? I would love to engage with the aviation industry to see how we can make an impact and the contribution and help my colleagues who do that. And at the same time, obviously in Europe, it's a shame that in the last 20 years we haven't built the high-speed transition corridors yet between Italy and Holland, or France and Poland. I mean, that's ridiculous, to be very honest now. And I think there it comes very much back to policy making, that we have to demand that the subsidies are not good enough. I think there's a readiness of a lot of people now to change to rails. But when you go by rail between Austria and Holland, often like me, this never happens without any incidents. It's quite funny, always delays. So the inconvenience is too high. Brings us back to the sexiness. It has to be made easy to travel. And sure, train should be the way how we engage and travel to each other in Europe in the future. So really, again, demand and help. I don't know which organizations are pushing for the trans-European networks. Pick the discussion up again, bring it to the politicians, and make sure we, as of now, are creating the future, and at the same time minimizing our harm that we are creating right now by offsetting. And recently, with our team, we're also looking into obviously unleashing technologies that go beyond that, right? So what can we do in terms of new ways of transport, redesign mobility, and we have to look in the whole picture again. So yes, we should all know about the impact we are creating, limit the impact as much as possible. At the same time, put yourself out there and work on the difficult systemic issues of the future. Definitely aviation and mobility is part of that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with having to make it very easy and cheap. Otherwise, there's much less incentive for people to do so.
Yeah, great question.
Another very interesting question actually is, we always see green investments as expensive and something that costs a lot of money. How can we make the climate action profitable, and how can you portray it as something that can actually save money in the long term, rather than it just coming up as, well, it's always the more sustainable option is always the more expensive option?
Yeah, good question. I think I mentioned Vice President Al Gore, who is the head of several investment companies as well, I believe. And one is called the Generation Investment. And he said it's the biggest investment opportunity. And I would say that's a nice summary of the debate, but obviously it has many more nuances. I think the laws and investment frameworks are not supporting long-term sustainable investments yet, because virgin material, new products are still cheaper than second-hand products. I think that's the easy way to explain how not everything is priced into products. That should not be the case. The real cost of product has to be displayed. And I think that with public subsidy and mixed funding models that will enable technologies for the future, that is the way where people should and can invest. I get a feeling that we need to think about not that we want to get our money back and earn a lot of money in the next 2 or 3 years. But if we look into an investment horizon of 10 years, that the sustainable solutions will have the customer of the future, will have the traction we need, but it might still need some months that we can actually get this famous hockey curve going, that we can have some good examples we can demonstrate where investments in green businesses are eventually the better ones. I think the one example is always interesting, the solar and coal example. Nobody expected that the renewable energy price would drop that dramatically. And basically there are no investments in coal anymore. I think that's a very interesting one where this stuff is happening. The pension funds, I said before about London and New York, that not investing anymore in fossil fuels is another one. So you see the shifts. And I think the more the businesses and the more the consumers will also support this, then the investment hypothesis that the green investment will be the right one will be correct. And I want to add one thing, because sometimes we forget about this. What does it do to us as people? I rather invest money that I have or time that I have in the right things than in the things that hold us back and are bad for future generation, the future of the planet. I think it's a good way of checking in with yourself what you think is really the right thing to do. And then I think then we'll take the right decisions. And then investment will also pay off.
Yeah. Well said. And we also have another question from Gregory. He is saying, how do you use businesses? How do you see businesses help accelerate the change of consumer mentalities? So in terms of the whole marketing around it. So their role in changing
the role of businesses. The role of businesses in it.
Yeah,
that's a tricky one, huh? Because we often think they are whitewashing and they are manipulating us to do the right, to do something that they want. And I think that companies are famous to do that in an extremely good level. I think as a consumers, we have to be aware. That's the only thing I know myself when I go out there shopping, to check in again with my own sense of responsibility. Am I supposed to buy this or not? Can I get this secondhand? What's the choice? And make an educated choice. I think that's an important one. Educate ourselves. There are fantastic platforms that are combining different banks. I looked at one last time, and really it gives you very little choice in the end of the day when you want to be an aware citizen and consumer, which ones you actually can defend and where you want to put your money. I think that's really up to us. I'm less worried about the marketing of companies, because we are all old enough and intelligent enough to say the difference when it is something we want to have because we urge for it, or if it's the right thing to have because it's really needed. So let's keep each other accountable and make the right decisions there, and not blame the others. I'm not such a friend of that. But I think when we collectively are punishing the companies that don't take the right choices, then I think they will be out of business. It's a very quick supply and demand question. And I want to answer that a colleague answered on LinkedIn, on Instagram, and managed to get a comment in about the events and festival industry and how they are playing, as she's commenting, a very interesting role on the evolution of communities. And what would be my thought on the sustainability of such events and festivals? I think that's an interesting, when you go there, I think it's a very special time that we have a time in a festival, or when we have time at an event where a community is being put together for a temporary basis, but it also sparks the energy. And we've been discussing this a lot with the event industry, that sparks the possibility and gives the space to change. And I think that's an interesting one in festivals. And if you want to know more, I'm involved in a group that is thinking about the circular economy and festivals. So if you look at the Green Deal for circular festivals online, it's also the opportunity to come and join that group. We're thinking how we can make that experience better for festivals, to learn from each other, because many of them globally, with some thousands to some hundreds of thousands of people going there, they are thinking how we can make this a better experience, to be a place of change, even to the extent that they could be places of change where we could experiment for an amount of time for solutions that then could be applied in a city. Because a festival is like a small city, right? You look at certain energy, food, and building construction materials being used there. And so we are working with them to see what best practices are, what is the current policy, what is the problem with the laws that we could help the regulators, for example, here in Holland, to change. So we are working directly with the government to influence this policy change. So for me, a festival should be circular. A festival and an event where we leave a lot of trash behind. Sometimes you see horrible photos that you can't really see or think that this is true, what's happening. But it is an opportunity for people to inspire them for change. So I try to work with the change maker community. We have acknowledged that possibility, and I would encourage everybody to join that, to make sure we can make the change again happen together faster, because we have not yet solved all the questions that we see in that industry.
Yeah. And as a last question from the audience, this is more on the technology side of things. So from Seyhan, he mentions that AI is largely developing on regulators, and he asked, do you think our curiosity to develop AI might actually hinder sustainable development in an unforeseeable or indirect way? For example, jobs being replaced, leading to the possibility of people becoming less compliant with what governing bodies say. So what do you see as AI's role in the future of sustainable development? Will it help accelerate it, or will it have unforeseeable consequences more?
I think I don't have a very good answer for that one. When we started to look at this at the climate in the climate negotiations, is we need to define a problem, and if we have the problem and we can apply artificial intelligence to find better solutions, that's I think a way how I could think about the question. So when it's, for example, about optimizing or defining markets where real costs are the driver for demand, maybe artificial intelligence, that is just a faster way, I think, of learning about solutions to certain problems, or learning about certain patterns then we can come up with certain solutions. Not any clear example comes to my mind. I have one that I think the World Economic Forum worked with the shipping industry on looking at illegal shipping routes globally. That was a very interesting a project where the predictive models that could be set up through artificial intelligence gave an opportunity to find certain solutions and fight perpetrators much quicker. In the climate space, that's a good one. Would love to hear from you. I'll educate myself on that, but then I don't have a good answer. I think there's no black and white answer. Again, if there's a certain problem we are seeing and we can use artificial intelligence to solve this, then that's fantastic. I think that's always a good opportunity. People like Elon Musk know much more about this. The question obviously is, how do we master artificial intelligence, or will they master us in the future? That's a fantastic one, but I think that's I leave to Finn for a different podcast.
Yeah, thank you for that answer. And I think really just to finish off the whole discussion, what do you think is the most important point or thing that you want people to take from this entire discussion that we've just had?
I come back to my 3 points, Finn. Action, action, action. Please, and stay in touch and continue the conversation.
Perfect. All right. Well,
thanks to you and your team and everybody online.
Yeah, thank you to you as well. Thank you for joining us today. Your insights have been incredibly valuable. And just for everyone else, this podcast is a prelude to our to Wageningen University's TEDx Climate Conference, which is in about 2.5 weeks. We will have speakers put forward their own ideas towards solutions of energy, built environment, transport, food, and ourselves and nature. And yeah, this conference will be live streamed for free for everyone to watch. So we'll provide a link in the comments and also on our pages for anyone who would like to watch that. But yeah, thank you very much, Harold, for your time and for your thoughts and insights. And thank you very much to everyone else who have participated in the discussion and joined us today. So thank you very much.
Keep it up.